I'm back. And what I'm doing here today is I'm going to take out this injection pump on this 188 diesel. Now, some of you that have followed the videos, this chronology, how it's gone is, I've got fuel all the way to here. So fuel from the tank through the filters, all the way to the suction strainer. And then the other day, there's a little drain port on the side here that drains this governor chamber. And I drained that out, and it was old fuel in there. And I put it back in, I cranked it over a bunch of times, drained it out, and there was new fuel in there. So it's getting from the pump through up into this governor chamber, but I'm getting absolutely no delivery when I crack these injectors and crank it. And I've done that, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 different battery charges, like I've wound it right down. And absolutely no diesel showing anywhere here, no bubbles, nothing, not a hint of any fuel coming up to the injectors. So somewhere in this pump, it's set for over 15 years, with old fuel in it. So it's going to come apart. I'm going to take it out and we're going to rebuild it. That being said, there's a couple things you got to do first. On this particular tractor, there's an inspection port here on the bell housing. The engine's there, there's your torque tube, and you can see your flywheel in there. So anyway, I took this plug out. You see there's a little pointer in there? See this little pointer? So what I'm doing is I'm hand turning the engine until I get these marks lined up, okay? The other thing is you want to determine the direction that your engine turns when the starter turns it. So I've done that already, and I've determined that from facing the tractor, like standing in front of it, the engine turns clockwise. What I'm going to do is, because it's very hard working by myself here to see down that hole when those marks come up. So what I'm going to do is I've taken off my breather here, got it sitting up there, and I'm going to take off the valve cover so I can look at the push rods on number 1 cylinder, and I'll know when the number 1's top dead center on the compression stroke. So we're just about to do that. Take the valve cover off. Now, I had this valve cover off, I think it was about a year ago. I looked in there, first time I looked in, and I oiled it all up in there, so it should be okay inside there. But, and then what we're going to do, once we get this off, what we're going to do is we're going to line up the marks on the injection pump before we take the pump out. So that way we know that when we're done rebuilding the pump and we line up the marks on the pump, when we put it in the engine, that it should all be timed properly, okay? So that's the whole purpose here. I'm not just going to rip the pump out because we don't know what position the pump's in relation to the engine, and the timing will be completely out of whack. And that is a factor, that's another unknown factor I don't need, because right now it's not starting, and I've sort of narrowed it down to fuel not coming up and figure that's it. But if if I just tore the pump out and stuck it back in anywhere and it doesn't start, there's another factor you've added to the mix. All it would be is, that timing's off. It's not going to fire or start then either, right? So, a little bit of backtracking here. I was hoping it was just going to start, but it was against, good knowledge, It was just a hope that it was going to start. I mean, it's been sitting a long time with old fuel in it, so. Okay, just let me get this off and I'll show you what it looks like inside there. Okay. All right. That looks pretty good down in there, doesn't it? I got a drip of rain happening here now. I don't want that in there too badly. There's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. On the end of the crankshaft, there's a 1/2-inch square. It fits a 1/2-inch extension. Okay, so I'm going to turn that clockwise. Okay. Oh, they're not moving. I think that might have been it. Let's see where exhaust. Okay, that's going to be the exhaust opening. I think we just had top dead center. Okay, exhaust is closing. Intake is opening. Okay, intake is closing. Okay, we're coming up top dead center number 1 now. And these 2 rockers are just, the intake has come up and stopped. And then So I'm thinking that's number 1 top dead center at the compression stroke. So what I'm going to do is now I'm taking off this inspection cover on the side of the injection pump, which is right here. See right there, that little cover? There's 2 little screws in it. And, you know, it's really easy to get at on the bench, but with this big frame in the way, you got to use a short screwdriver. So how I've got at that is I put a screwdriver like that in a pair of vice grips. And I was able to get down and get down like that and get them to turn. It's a tight squeeze. Because I want to make sure, I've got an inspection mirror, and I want to make sure that those lines, there's 2 lines in there. There's one on the valve body and there's one on the weight cage, and they have to be lined up if it's in the right spot. So, okay, so I got those 2 little screws out of there. Now, I'm going to pop this cover off and see what happens. Here, let's try that. That should go. Oh, there it goes. There's fuel in there. Down it goes. Yeah. Oh, I better turn the fuel off because it's just going to bleed all the way through there. 1 second. Step 1, before you start this job, turn off the fuel. I got it as step 63, but it'll work. Right in that little port there should be 2 lines. It should be lined up when it's timed right. Okay, let me get that cleaned up for you here. Take a look. Anyway, I'm looking there in that little port, and you see on the right-hand side on that sort of bronzy colored piece, there's a line scribed halfway. I don't know if you can see that or not. So that's the stationary part, and the rotating part has to line up with that for it to be timed right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the engine over until those 2 lines in the pump line up. And then I'm not going to touch the engine. I'm not going to turn it over the whole time the pump is out. I'll take the pump out, I'll rebuild it, I'll line the pump up on these marks and put it in. And that should be it. That shouldn't have disturbed the timing at all. If I do it that way, I don't really need to find the mark on the flywheel. If I turn it until these 2 lines here are lined up, I've got it. I am going to double check the book before I commit to that, but I think that's rational. That's logical, isn't it? It's so against what I normally do, too. Huh. And if anybody needs confirmation of that, just go look at the top of the video here and take a look at the trailer I took down last week. Okay, so to get this injection pump off, I'm going to have to move it back this way. And all this stuff is in the way of these filters. So I'm going to take out these filters and take out the housing for it and move all these linkages out of the way so I can disconnect these injector lines. And then, because on this pump here, the drive shaft is fixed into a gear inside the gear housing here, and it protrudes out into the pump, okay? So the housing, the whole pump housing has to slide back off of that. And so the drive shaft stays with the tractor, the pump comes off. So to do that, I got to pull it right back to, you know, a couple of inches, and I'm not going to be able to do it with this here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drain out these filters, take them off the engine, and get everything ready to pull that pump. But I'm going to double check those lines, that they're lined up first, and I'm going to check the book. There's a lot of vague information. You know, I looked online about how to do it, and there's so many places, you know, they tell you one thing, and they don't really explain it. You know, they don't walk you through in baby steps that some people need. And boy, do I ever need baby steps sometimes, you know. You know, I'd like to hear it, you know, like this is, you start here and you finish here, and that's the project, right? But a lot of information is not as clear as that, right? Anyway, I'm going to try and clear it up for you here. Okay, so I roll the engine around until I could get these marks lined up. And it's pretty hard to see, but they're the stationary mark and the rotating mark are lined up exactly. I had a lot of trouble finding the graduations on the flywheel, and I was looking, the pictures I saw had them to the right of that pin, and even there's a video online of a guy and his graduations were really clear and they were to the right of the pin, but I found them by wiping off the flywheel. I took out the starter, And I would just roll the engine a little bit by hand, and I would wipe off the flywheel. Guys, see, I'm not sure if you can see, there's some graduations in there. Anyway, I found them. I found all the marks. So this is number 1, top dead center on the compression stroke, and you can see that both push rods are loose. So both valves are shut. Number 1, top dead center on the compression stroke. And that's when the pump would fire. And we got our indicator there on the graduations. And I believe that is 8 degrees before top dead center. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to block off the starter. I've got the battery disconnected, and I can take out the pump. And the one other thing I'm going to do before I remove these bolts on the pump flange, I'm going to mark the housing to the flange, just so for my own reference when I put this back in. I'm just draining down the filters here now. There's a big nut on the top here that holds this whole assembly in the bottom filter, and then I get 2 bolts onto the side of the block, and I can take this whole filter assembly out, both of them, and I'll get that out of the way. I sprayed these last night, these injector lines, and I loosened them a little bit. Okay, so these are going to come off here. This is 9/16. These guys. I've also loosened the nuts on the injector lines here. And I'm going to take apart this clamp right here, and hopefully I'll be able to remove each line individually. Okay, so I've just gone in and underneath, and I've taken a photo of those lines lined up in the little window of the fuel pump, and I've taken a look at the other side, and this is it. I got my mark here. If I don't turn the engine, I should be able to put this back in the same spot. Okay, this wrench I found, I think it's for tightening distributors, you know, getting around distributors. 9/16 end, you can see where it's been ground off. And I thought it would work out there without being modified, but I'm gonna have to grind it off some more. Try that. There's a tight spot. Why would they do that? You know, when I see stuff like that, I wonder why. Why wasn't somebody thinking? You know, they could have cast, this is a cast flange here. They could have cast a little, you know, a little peninsula off it on that side and put a bolt out a little further. No, it's just they weren't thinking. Just weren't thinking that day. Okay. I got that last one out. There it is. Okay, here goes everything. The pump should just slide straight out now. Okay, so the pump just pulls straight off the shaft. Okay. And I did that last night, but I'm just going to show you here. The shaft stays stationary. It stays with the engine. Okay. And what I did was I just put the injector lines back in, so I've snugged them up at the top. And that way any moisture that may get on the engine while I have the pump out is just going to drip down. I didn't want anything to go in the injectors. So that's why I've done that. Okay. Let's get this inside and have a look at it.